Did you know that you can create footage from absolutely nothing in After Effects? Now, we've got a piece of footage in this project, and if you want to follow along, the project's called Creating Text, and you can find that in the O2 Creating Comps and Layers folder. So, we have a piece of video footage in here, but we can create other pieces of footage or other layers without having to import footage at all. And the first type of footage we're going to have a look at are text layers. And in order to add a text layer, what we're going to do is go up here to select the horizontal type tool. Keyboard shortcut for that is Command-T or Control-T on Windows. And then what I'm going to do is just move over to the composition panel, and I'm just going to click round about here once, and that will place an insertion point, and I'm ready to start creating text. So we can just start typing. So let's type energy unleashed. And you'll notice it goes slightly off the screen, but don't worry about that because we're going to fix that soon. Now, once you've entered the text, you really want to accept the changes you've made. And there are two ways you can do that, because you really need to accept the changes before you start making changes to the text in the character panel. Because if I make changes now, without accepting that, you'll notice it's not having any effect on the text. And that's because I've still got the type tool selected, but I haven't made a selection. So in order for these to make changes to the text, you would need to actually make a selection. And you'll see if I drag across the text to select it, and now make changes, it will update. But really, when you've finished editing your text, what you can do is either click on the selection tool or hit the Enter key on the number pad of your computer to accept the changes. And when you do that, you'll see it highlights the text with a bounding box. Now, if you hit the Enter key on your keyboard, the type tool will remain selected. So you can hit the V key on the keyboard to jump back to the selection tool. Now, with the selection tool and the layer selected, any changes that you make here in the character panel will update on the text. So what we're going to do is we're just going to bring the size down a little bit till it fits in. We're also going to change the font. Now, I'm on a Mac, so it's defaulted to Helvetica. If you're on Windows, it will probably default to Arial. So let's go into our font family menu and choose Arial Black. And you'll see that gives us a much more chunky effect. Now, you'll notice the text is going off screen now, so you may need to adjust that. And you can adjust it by scrubbing the value from left to right like this. I just hold the cursor over the value and scrub left to right to make a change to that value. An alternative is select the text that represents the value and use the up and down arrow keys on the keyboard to make it bigger or smaller. Holding down Shift will go in increments of 10 so that you can get to where you want to be a little bit quicker. Now, I'm also going to go down to the bottom of the character panel here. And if you just extend the character panel, you'll notice that there are some other options here. Now we have things like line spacing and leading, kerning, and we have baseline shift and scale options. Now down at the bottom, we have faux bold and faux italic buttons. So if you don't have an italic or bold version of a font, you can force them to be bold or italic using these buttons. We also have an all caps button. I want you to click on the all caps button to make the text all capital letters. And you can see now, without having to retype the text, that we have all caps. Now, you can also adjust things like the tracking. If you want to increase the tracking, make a little bit more space between the letters, you can do. And of course, once you've adjusted the tracking, you probably want to zoom in a little bit so you can see your spacing a bit better. So I'm just going to hit Command+ on the keyboard to zoom in a little bit. And then I'm going to hold down Spacebar to toggle to the hand tool so I can move it into position. Now, once you've added a bit of tracking, you probably then want to kern individual letter spaces. You'll notice that the space between the curved letters like the G and the R and the Y and the G, where there are diagonals, seems to be more pronounced than the spacing between straight uprights like the N and the E. So really we want to go in and kern these individual spaces. Now to use kerning, you'll notice it's greyed out at the moment. We need to actually double click on the text to make it editable. Once it's editable, we need to move between each of the letter pairs and kern them individually. So to kern the spacing, we move the insertion point between the characters we want to kern, and then we have access to our kerning values, and we can start to move letters closer together or further apart, depending on the shape of them. And what we want to do is achieve a kind of even amount of space between each of the letters, an apparent even space. And of course, you can use the up and down arrow keys also on kerning as well. So that's a little bit about the character panel. There are a couple of other things to point out. If I select the text, I can also add a stroke to the text. First of all, I would choose a fill and stroke up here. So let's bring the stroke to the front, and let's just choose a black stroke. And you'll notice I can up the size of the stroke, again selecting the text and hitting the arrow keys on the keyboard. It will default to putting the stroke over the fill, but I can also choose fill over stroke if I prefer that. And that way I can go up to quite a high value with my stroke, but still make the text completely readable. So you can get an effect like that. Now, if you were doing that, you would need to kern the letters yet again. So a little run through of some of the controls available to you in the character panel. Similar to all the other Adobe applications, so you should be familiar with them if you've used something like Photoshop or Illustrator.